Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is without a doubt the best movie that came out since Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home. It's dark and serious than any of the movies in the trilogy, with some hints of comedy. It introduces an interesting villain played by an excellent actor. It shows moments of tragedy, for which you really feel for the characters. Who could have thought that a conversation between a talking raccoon and a cybernetic otter could be filled with emotions and drama? I guess, this is what we were expecting from a cinema, and this movie delivers a bunch of such stuff. Not to say that this movie does not have any flaws, just like any other movie. We will talk about the flaws in the later part of the video. But it is safe to say that, the good in this movie outweighs the bad, so much so that, you tend to ignore them. But it is my duty to highlight every aspect of a movie, good or bad. It's no secret that there's a lot of expectations from this movie. Not only is it James Gunn's last movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and probably the final chapter of the Guardians story, but it is pretty much the only movie left in the whole MCU that anyone really cares about. After a string of flops and underwhelming projects that came out in the past 2 years, they desperately need a smash hit to get back on track, and Volume 3 is probably their best chance. But does it deliver what was expected from it? Well, it does a few things right, a few things extremely well, and while some aspects are total bullshit. The movie is almost completely isolated from the rest of the MCU. So much so that, they don't even mention Thor, which we have seen in Love and Thunder that the Guardians spent some time with Thor briefly. This is actually a good thing, because then, you get to tell your story without worrying about the overarching cinematic universe, which limits the creative freedom. So, here goes the plot of the movie. If you haven't watched the movie yet, here's your spoiler alert. The movie starts with Peter Quill, Rocket, Nebula, Drax, Mantis, Kraglin and Cosmo have occupied the severed celestial head, Nowhere. If you haven't watched the holiday special episode, this was already established in that. Peter has become an alcoholic, unable to get over the death of his love, Gamora. In their new home base, the Guardians are chilling with the local inhabitants and going about their ways, when this golden dude suddenly shows up and starts fucking the place up, beating everybody to a pulp. He critically wounds Rocket and was about to kill Drax, until Nebula stabs him in the back with her mechanized sword and kills him. But later he escapes while everyone was distracted tending to Rocket. If you haven't noticed by now, the golden dude is Adam Warlock, whom we have seen in the previous movie growing up in a cocoon. So you are wondering, his powers and abilities seem similar to that of Captain Marvel. He can fly and project energy beams from his hands. He could blast through solid walls without even getting a single scratch, yet a sword could rip through his gut. Seems a bit contradicting, right? Anyways, moving on, Rocket is critically injured, and the Guardians are trying to stabilize him when they learn that there's a kill switch preventing them to operate on him. The only way to disarm is a code to disable the kill switch. So they track down the organization where Rocket was created and decide to infiltrate it. And wounded Adam Warlock returns to his mother, Aisha, the leader of Sovereign. We learn that High Evolutionary was behind the attack on the Guardians and wants to kidnap Rocket. So he hatches a plan to capture them. We also get to know that Adam was removed from his cocoon prematurely, due to which he is not fully developed and behaving like a man-child throughout the film. The Guardians seek help from the Ravagers and teams up with Gamora, not the old one. This Gamora is from the new timeline, void of the character arc that she went through in the previous 2 movies. This version of Gamora is a total dick, as mentioned in the movie. Together they sneak into Orgoscope, a planetary body made up of flesh, hoping to find the deactivation code, only to learn that it was already removed and offloaded into some dude's brain. Then they decide to confront the High Evolutionary directly. Their quest takes them to Counter-Earth, the headquarters of High Evolutionary, made by him with his experimental creatures who appears to be half humans and half animals. Meanwhile, we see flashbacks of how Rocket was made by High Evolutionary, and why he is so important to him. To be honest, these flashbacks were the best scenes in the entire movie, and we really feel for Rocket, what all tragedy he went through as a young raccoon, and why he is what he is. Rocket's backstory are some of the most compelling, hearty, and tragic stuff that we have ever seen. The team unrelentingly tries to save Rocket, and after he is resuscitated, together, they defeat High Evolutionary and were successful in saving a bunch of humans and animals, captured by the villain for experiments. The movie's ending is not at all what we were expecting. Many of the characters came close to dying, but some way or the other, they were saved. Peter Quill leaves the Guardians to return back to Earth to his grandfather. Mantis ventures alone on her way of self-discovery. Drax and Nebula stays in Nowhere to rebuild the place. Gamora rejoins the Ravagers group. Rocket leads the new Guardians team consisting of Kraglin, Cosmo, an overgrown Alpha Groot, Phyla, and Adam Warlock. Another great addition to the movie is the villain High Evolutionary, and the actor that plays him does an excellent job of portraying the intensity and his malicious intent. I believe this is the best villain we had since Thanos, and so much better than Kang or Gore that we saw in the past MCU movies. The visual aspects of the movie and CGI were really great and I have no complaints there. I really like the hallway fight scene, which was so well choreographed that it feels like one long single shot. Hats off to the creative group responsible for it. Now, let's get to the problems. To put it shortly, this movie feels like a mess. It is all over the place in terms of emotional tone and consistency. Almost every important scene is followed by an unnecessary joke or ridiculous slapstick comedy. 1 minute, you are in a dark and serious moment, and just when you think you are about to get into the groove, the movie makes a 180 degrees turn towards goofy comedy. And it happens so often that you tend to feel a little bit irritated. Sometimes the comedy lands perfectly, and sometimes it doesn't. The excess use of comedy takes away the seriousness from an important scene, and believe me, there are some really important and impactful scenes in the movie. But you tend to get lost in the abyss of mindless comedy, for the most part. The pacing of the movie is also a mixed bag. Especially in the first half of the movie, where there's an excruciating long sequence in which the Guardians infiltrate a high-security facility to retrieve deactivation code to Rocket's kill switch. It doesn't lead the plot anywhere and feels like a total waste of time. This could have been easily condensed to a 3 to 4 minute sequence, instead of the half-an-hour scene filled with goofy comedy and lots of unnecessary character introductions and interactions. Talking about characters, Nebula in the whole movie is just yelling at everybody else. It's not funny at all. It's just straightforward irritating, which is a shame because I have grown to love the character so much, and Karen Gillan has portrayed the role really well. Adam Warlock, played by Will Poulter, got a compelling intro, but then he would just vanish and return only for a brief moment or so. I believe he got the weakest character arc among the others. Even Drax and Mantis has important role than Adam, instead of just comedic relief. Groot, Kraglin and others kind of felt like lost in such a heavy impactful movie. Groot, for the first time says, "I love you guys," instead of his usual, "I am Groot." Apart from that, there isn't anything to remember him for. The soundtrack is very special and integral to the Guardians trilogy. I really like the music selection of the first two movies, but in this movie, somehow it felt overdone and overused. I couldn't connect well with the background songs. Also, I didn't like the costumes that Guardians are wearing. It may be comic accurate, but in the movie, it feels very dull and ordinary. In the previous two movies, each one of them has a different costume which differentiates one from the other. I believe that these flaws are what makes this movie so great. The ability to conquer the flaws and yet deliver a compelling and enjoyable movie is what I think is great about this movie. James Gunn has clearly nailed it, and he is now among the top directors who can actually create great movies, in my opinion. Anyways, let me know in the comments about your opinion on this movie. And please subscribe to the Socks Reviews channel for more such videos, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.